So welcome everyone to the Sculptform webinar and the speaker series. We would normally be hosting this from our Melbourne design studio, but due to restrictions, we are hosting this from home. It does allow us to have some interstate international guests. So if you are joining us from outside of Melbourne, please let us know where you're from. Drop it in chat, we'd love to know where you're at. Also love to touch base and know how you're going. We do have some poll questions, so when you have a minute, please jump into that tab and let us know what brings you here and what you're interested in. Once you do that, you will also know where everyone else is at. So I'll take you through the agenda for today. First of all, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and the people of the Kulin Nation and pay our respects to the elders past and present. I will shortly pass you over to Kai, who's our Business Development Manager based out of the Melbourne studio. He has a background in industrial design, and prior to joining Sculptform, he has worked in architectural and decorative lighting for a number of years. So it is a topic very close to his heart. You will hear from our wonderful presenters. We've got some great insights into what they do on a day-to-day basis, so I'm really looking forward to it. They will be able to answer some questions at the end and also during the presentation. So please drop them in the chat. If we can't get through them in a presentation, we will follow up. So please do ask away. We want to know what you're interested in. And towards the end, we will also draw out one lucky person to receive a wonderful Melbourne and Shandong package, which we'll send out. It will be drawn out from people in the questions tab. So please do ask away for a chance to get one of those. So that's all from me. I'll pass you over to Kai.
Thanks, Kate. So as mentioned, I'm one of the business development managers here at Sculptform. For anyone that's here that's not unfamiliar with Sculptform, we are a supplier of architectural lighting systems. We are 100% Australian owned and operated, with the majority of our supply chain existing here in Melbourne. For anyone that wants to learn more about our products, jump onto our website. It's a fantastic resource, got everything from pricing through to Revit families. So today's webinar is on lighting for feature walls and ceilings. So the inspiration for putting this webinar on came from collaborating with the guys here presenting today in the design of our new studio here in Melbourne. It was through collaborating with these guys that we really sort of learnt the importance of lighting, not just to our products, but to the success of an overall project. So we thought we'd get these guys to come in and share a little bit of their industry knowledge with our clients and the broader industry. So just quickly, a little on why lighting is important to Sculptform. And so this exists across three different frames. Firstly, starting at the material level, having lighting is really important for doing that material justice. If you're working with fine materials such as American white oak, you want to make sure that you're really highlighting the grain and the natural beauty of that timber. Then taking a step back to the level of form. So at Sculptform, we sculpt forms as a part of architectural lighting systems, and they really come to life through the play of light and shadow. So that's where it's really important to be thinking about the locations of your lighting and how that light interacts with those forms. And then finally out to the level of the space. So this is where we consider both the material and the form and how that adds value to the space and how that informs the experience of that space. So aside from our design studio, another great example of our products from Sculptform being used with lighting, both decorative and architectural, is 356 Collins Street. On this project that was done by NDY Light, we worked with a supplier to integrate lighting into our battens, as well as work with them in terms of specifying materials and really bringing that project to life. Anyway, that's enough from me. I'm now going to hand the digital stage over to Daniel Treacy. Daniel Treacy is the head of design at Racumba Lighting. an award-winning industrial designer and lighting engineer responsible for directing Recumba's collaborations with international and Australian designers, as well as the in-house design team working on Recumba's product range and large bespoke installations. Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks very much, Kai. And welcome everyone. Hope my fellow Melbourneites are getting ready to spend some more summer outdoors. Just going to share some presentations here. Hopefully that's visible. So I'm going to approach today's talk from the perspective of a luminaire designer. So our focus is on sort of the physical light emitting object. And I'm going to do this through the lens of 3 case studies where Recumba was commissioned to produce a bespoke feature light against the backdrop of a feature wall or a feature ceiling. You can, what I'd like to sort of ultimately have a takeaway from this is to consider lighting and the physical luminaire itself more heavily when working on architectural projects and treat it as a really critical part of the architectural space. We all know lighting is often sort of relegated to the end and value managed out quite often. But I'd make a case that all of the projects we look at today in the next 10 minutes would be substantially less impactful without the luminaire element. These aren't necessarily hero projects, but they are very good examples of projects where we were involved from an early stage and we worked with clients that really valued the lighting as an important contributor to the space. So we're very fortunate on these 3. So the first case study and the first theme I'm going to call blurring the boundary. And this is the concept that a luminaire can be a significant part of the architecture. You could say it's hard to define where one stops and the other starts. It's not an adornment. So the case study I've selected here is Arcare in Templestowe. This was in the retirement living category that we work in quite often. These are really rewarding sites because they often have the scope of a commercial build, but it's still ultimately someone's home, many people's home. This is a fully bespoke project that we did with the in-house Arcare design team that we have a great relationship with, and also via architects. The best part of this was it was so narrative driven. We walked into their studio initially and they had all of these paper objects laid out on the table. And they were like the chatterboxes that you play with as a kid. And they drew this inspiration and then we took it from there and explored how we could transfer that into this big 13.5 meter long fitting. I think we really managed to extend the existing detailing of the space. You have these slatted ceilings and we mirrored that in the lighting effect. So we had these slots that we projected through to kind of mirror the surfacing of the battens onto the face of the light. This theme is all about blurring the boundaries. So we even incorporated some materiality that you would typically associate with architecture, in this case, folded aluca bond with an anodized finish and used that in the light. One of the things we always take care to do is explore physically and mock up the effect that you're going to have with the light source. So there was a lot of backwards and forwards and like small scale prototyping that was really very enjoyable for this project. Ultimately, we came up with this multi-tiered pyramid layout, and we're really pleased that this project won a Good Design Award last year for VIA Architects and Arcare. And one of the judges came out with this great comment that they felt like the scale of these pyramids was a way of bringing the architecture of the roof down to a more human scale, and it acted as a bit of an intermediary between the sheer scale of the site and sort of the people living inside it. A couple of bonus examples on this theme of blurring the boundary. We have the Union Tower done by Ruthy Lohman Architects. We use these MDF light boxes with a 2-pack paint finish to act as almost like shades, but also blending into the cove that was built into the ceiling. And these hanging glass panels that you would more typically associate with maybe room dividers than a light. And then of course we have Melbourne Drill Hall, where we did these 10-meter long giant stadium lights. Obviously this is a more traditional perspective on what a light can be, but I think that it really drew from the Art Deco architecture of this space and built on the theme of just scale with the columns. My next theme, I'm going to call Beyond Illumination. And this is a concept that the luminaire can do more than just provide light. It can be decoration. It can obscure undesirable lines of sight to hide, let's say, surfaces on the ceiling. It can act as acoustic baffling. So lighting can actually become a functional part of the feature ceiling and wall beyond just the illumination. And so the example I want to show here is the auditorium at the Translational Research Institute in Brisbane. This was a great project quite a number of years ago now, and especially important in the context of an auditorium is the notion of acoustic baffling. And so you can see that with this project, which by the way is an absolutely incredible site, like a really amazing place that doctors gather to share research. You can see here that not every single shade is actually illuminated. So this introduces the concept that a shade does not necessarily, or a light doesn't necessarily have to be all about the illumination effect. In this case, by not necessarily lighting all of them and by doing it with a relatively cost-effective product like a custom shade, you allow yourself to build on the grandeur of scale and repetition, which is really what I think made such a difference with this. That said, not everything goes to plan. This project is quite close to my heart because what happened was we sent these 2,000 shades off to Queensland, thought that project was done, and there was a site delay and they parked all 2,000 shades in a metal shipping container in the hot Queensland summer sun for 2 months. And when they went to install them, some of the seams had started to open. So I personally flew up there and built this rig, and we ultrasonically welded all the seams back closed before they were installed. Case study of how you can never quite prepare for every eventuality, but I'm very glad that I saw it in person because it was a pretty stunning site to actually lay eyes on. Yeah, one of my personal favorites that we've done over the last 10 years. Another example along this theme of beyond illumination is the Bendigo RSL. We did a large number of these 7-meter diameter circles. I took inspiration from the Van Gogh painting Starry Night. And the idea is that it just uses these small light sources, but the bulk of the install is actually this hanging fringe structure. What it does is it sort of diffuses the light. If you look at it from the side, you don't get direct glare. And it also spreads the light a lot. And another case study along this theme is maybe the Point Lonsdale Aged Care Home. And we've got these shades. In this instance, we didn't even supply lights. We actually just produced the shades and recommended that they fit a pattern of the existing downlights behind it. So it was great. We didn't actually have to allocate the lighting in the budget. We could dedicate it all to the feature piece. So that takes us to the third theme, which I'm going to call Breathing Room. And this is in slight contrast to theme 1. This is the idea that sometimes you need to be careful not to overwhelm or compete with the architecture. The objective is to complement it. So my selected project here is St. John of God Hospital in Berwick. It was interesting to be working in a health category. They had the foyer of the hospital had this very large void, which they wanted to fill with a light that wasn't going to block too many sight lines. So we took our product, in this case, a Ramis product, is a pre-existing designed part of our range. And we applied it in a bespoke way to be about 5 meters diameter and 2.5 meters high. And they loved the sort of molecular narrative behind this. They thought it had a very scientific kind of feel. The consideration of the architectural elements was really key in delivering this. There was the requirement to preserve the visibility of these perforated panels. They had battens with this etched logo into it and this beautiful feature ceiling. And also big windows along the mezzanine. So they wanted something that felt like it contributed to the space without blocking any of that. When we do projects like this, we don't always necessarily suggest starting from one of our core products. And I don't want to talk too much about our products necessarily, but I do want to talk about the mindset of understanding your customers and the people that you work with. What we find is Australian architects really like to have a really tailored approach. They want each project to be different. They don't want to just necessarily put lots of products into a space. They want to have a singular piece, and by having a product that you can configure, it allows you to do that. In this case, they had this really important logo built into the space, and because we can configure Ramis, this product, on site, we were able to really adapt it to preserve the sight lines to that really beautiful architectural detail. Couple of bonus examples along the same theme. This is Village Cinemas in the Crown Complex. These big 2-meter high wire form eggs. They were designed to allow clearance so that you could preserve sight lines to a movie trailer screen. We're still really proud of this. This is nearly 10 years old, hasn't had a single issue over the course of 10 years and still looks as fresh as it did the day it went in. My last example is one that not many people might have seen. This was the refurbished chocolate butter in Fed Square. They only really just finished it just before lockdown, so hopefully you can get there. But they had these beautiful tall ceilings, and they installed our typography system, which is part of our core range, in a way that was very extensive. They used a lot of it through the space, but it allowed so much breathability and sightlines through the architecture. So I hope that captured 3 sort of little takeaway points. I'm going to hand over to the next presenter now, and yeah, we'll take it from there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. It was great to see the breadth of projects which Recumber are engaging in. That's certainly a lot more than I was actually aware of, so I've certainly learned a little bit about the capabilities of Recumber, which is great. Already starting to get quite a few questions coming through on the Q&A. Also, just a reminder to people that we've got a little poll section, so jump on there and fill that out when you get a moment. And now I'd like to introduce to the digital stage Tom Curtis. Tom Curtis is the National Sales Manager of Light Project. He's a former architect and a valued member of the Light Project family for over 10 years. He has an inherent understanding of Light Project's history, the value of relationships, and the knowledge and experience Light Project proudly represent. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Kyle. Look, I'd like to thank, obviously, Sculptform for hosting their speaker series as well. It's really nice to get a group of people talking about a common interest in a similar platform and sharing their knowledge and expanding the networks. So I'm going to share a little bit about me and Light Project and an overview of what we do, because it's pretty much very complementary to what Recumber does, but on the opposite side, right? So we work in technical architectural lighting. So a lot of our luminaires are designed not to be visible, and the medium of light itself is what concentrates our attention and the intention of the architect and user. I'll just bring up a presentation. Choose media. So for those that aren't familiar with Light Project, we're basically a lighting supplier that specialises in technical architectural lighting products. We've been around in the industry for 12 years, and we've been fortunate enough to work on a number of globally recognised projects across our time. Those include projects like Mona, Soundtube, Garden State, Espy, Ritz, and too many others to mention. For me, I've been fortunate, as Kyle said, to be part of the Light Project for family for 10 years and been able to witness the development and growth of the company over its journey. Realistically, like Light Project's strength and what it chooses to deliver is based on its team. We're a team of experts in the technical lighting application and integration of lighting products. And we basically try our best to support architecture in the built environment. Our primary role is probably to educate and assist and support projects from design development right through to post-construction support. And we focus on 4 main key segments. So although we play in the majority of projects across Melbourne with architects at their desire, we really want to be famous for particular segments that align with our philosophies and allow us to produce the best results. These include luxury hospitality, commercial fit out and integration, education, mostly to do with universities and at private school application, retail, which is flagship, and Sculptform sort of crosses the boundary of flagship retail versus showroom, and then the built urban environment. The way that we operate is we're aligned with 10 or 12 core brands that we represent. These brands basically allow us to facilitate lighting support to lighting designers, architects, developers, and alike to support their projects. Now, we're not going to touch on, sort of like Dan did, the list of projects and the list of products that we support, because I don't think this conversation can allow us to cover all elements associated with the 12 core brands and the benefits of each. So the intention today is basically to talk a little bit about my experience, who I am, and what I've achieved in my takeaways from what I've learned over 10 years at Light Project and then 7 years of practicing architect. If I'm honest, when I first moved to Light Project, I wasn't expecting to know so little about the technical or design aspects of lighting, and still 10 years on, there's still so much to learn, and I'm amazed at how fast the industry progresses and changes and develops. The important thing I just want to make clear is that I'm not, nor claim to be, a lighting designer. I'm someone purely with an architectural background that's been fortunate enough to be surrounded by industry peers over the course of my journey, and seen me basically develop into the person that has a passion for lighting that previously I wasn't sure existed. Now, if I go, sorry, on from here. When Kyle and Sculptform first asked us to speak, we were umming and ahhing about what we talk about. You know, we support, we're a distribution model, but what is architectural lighting to Light Project? And this is where we differ greatly from Recumba's presentation. So our role is essentially to understand the architecture and support that through the medium of light. And it's not typically associated with the form factor of the fitting itself. And what I want to identify, and this is one of the golden sort of triggers that I learnt, and probably only recently, about the importance of everyone's role when it comes to collaborating in a project. And I've got this terrible little infographic about lighting terminology and understanding our role. For us, because we work across multiple sectors and we work with manufacturers, we work with engineers, consultants, lighting designers, and architects, everyone plays their part. So it's important for us to basically identify who works on what role. And I've got this little infographic that basically suggests that the manufacturer is concerned about the way that it distributes power and turns that power into light. And our manufacturers also then look at developing tools in how to shape that light to ensure the power being used is delivered to where the architect wants it. This is balanced against fixture design and visual comfort. We then look at energy efficiency, which is something that manufacturers and standards and compliance are focused on. You'll hear other companies claim about how efficient their fixtures are, lumens per watt, et cetera, et cetera. And then you'll hear essentially engineers talking about illuminance. What is my lux level on a surface, and is that going to tick my compliance box? You very rarely hear about luminance values. This is the architect's key role, understanding the way the material is to be perceived by the user. And I think what we fail to perceive is that the person that encompasses all these values and needs to know everything about all the different manufacturers, suppliers, luminance standards and efficiencies is the lighting designer. If you have someone that's rounded in this, is collaborating with the architect, you're going to get a great result. So how do we illustrate our role? Or what is our purpose? Basically at Light Project, the way that we work is we understand and establish what you want. That's your brief. That's what do you need from us. We then engage, deliver what you need, and then provide ongoing support. Because we work with a platform where we're supporting lighting designers, engineers, architects, clients, developers, our role is very flexible and adaptive. So for us, I guess the best way to share that process with you is on the Sculptform job, where we were engaged initially by Woods Bagot to have a look at a lighting solution that is hidden, respects the form, but provides functional lighting in the space. So this is obviously their showroom. I'm not sure how many people have managed to get there, but there was a very heavy design process that basically maintain two objectives for us. Make sure your light fittings do not protrude past the timber battens, and make sure they provide adequate lighting for the tasks that they're associated with. An example of this is the magic fitting that we put forward in this application. So in order to light the circulation spaces, we integrated a very narrow fitting with a circular beam that was regressed behind the battens to illuminate the floor. Again, not seen, but provided some functional illuminance on the surface below. Secondary to that were complex forms and geometries. So question was asked, can we integrate some light fixture within the stair treads of the auditorium and amphitheatre space to illuminate and essentially activate those spaces? And the answer is yes. And then again, there's a question. All right, so we've got these timber battens that are going to run all the way around. There's a form that is basically predetermined, and we don't want to just detract from it. So how can we regress and, I suppose, manipulate where we put the light to still allow that to be, the hero of this space? So we regressed some surface mounted fixtures behind the battens, and we coordinated all these installation details of about an 18-month period from design to supply and install with contractors, Sculptform, Woods Bagot. We went through a myriad of changes to produce an end result. I think that end result is something that's a credit to the collaboration across multiple parties, and the design is only elevated by the Recumber elements as well. So I think the takeaway for me is, as long as all parties are communicating, the brief and objectives are outlined, then we can support with product knowledge and advice to support the architect's vision. Now, the beauty of what we do, I think, is that we've got a lot of people to work with, right? And we've worked with a lot of people. So we've seen across our 12, globally distributed brands, a lot of exciting application images and intent. We've worked with a lot of lighting designers locally and world-renowned architects to produce significantly improved, I suppose, projects. Now, the other thing we're asked to talk about a little bit were, what are some of the elements designers should think of when considering lighting? And I kind of have a thought about this, and I thought I'd go back to my main slide. And I think the successful projects are the ones where multiple stakeholders are engaged with a common goal and a true appreciation of what their role is. So what does that look like? This is an example I got to work on with electrolyte lighting design when Fat Duck was introduced to Crown. And the reason I like this is it's a very clear indication of what the role and the purpose of the lighting is, and that's supported by the materiality and the texture of the finishes around it. You're at Heston Blumenthal's restaurant. There's a theatrical show. The food's the hero. The surfaces and the table and the people you're sitting with are the primary points of focus. And then there's texture and depth. So again, with FPOV, this is about texture and depth. It's just a bathroom at Mercedes and Me, new sort of headquarter and sales suite in the middle of the city. And it really shows that by adding a level of detail, texture, and complexity combined with lighting, you get this real nice layering effect of depth, and the materials are celebrated. In addition to that, there's Motor in Tasmania. So this is another great one done by Don Salisbury, now director of Electrolyte, and Fender Castellides, where you're basically trying to understand, what are your priorities? What are the elements in this space that I want to draw people's attention to? Is it the color? Is it the texture? If so, how so? And what are we going to do to make that element the hero statement piece? And this is a form and a function. So again, a lot of what Light Project does, because our products, although look similar, are complex in nature and have the ability to be integrated into architectural form. So this is Gemini HQ with NDY Light and Woods Bagot, where a complex geometry was not only the functional lighting for the space, but it was the architectural hero in itself. And this is the same sort of philosophy on the recently completed level crossings projects with Cox Architecture and WSP. So again, we're talking about engaging a consultant to come up with a lighting concept, work with the supplier and the architect to basically deliver a project of significant value and intent. And jet-based Melbourne as well. Form, texture, Arab specialist lighting, Cox architecture. And then experience and colour. So a lot of what we do is about identifying the opportunities to integrate lighting into existing architecture and enhance that experience. So this is a design by Electrolight. It's a lovely little story behind it where we got to sit down at a cafe. Jess Perry told me a secret little project he was working on, and we sketched it out on a piece of napkin paper. That was then taken away, where we're engaging 6 months down the track with AECOM on different adhesives to fix it to the DCM's iconic structure and make it a gateway to the city. Now, basically for us, I think the merit of engaging someone like a lighting consultant or speaking with Light Project is to assist you in telling your story through the medium of light, right? Although we're a supplier, we have got vast experience in it. We always think the best recommendation is to collaborate with as many people as possible to get expert advice. Now, the best way to probably reach us would be by following us through social media or reaching out after this presentation on something specific that interests you, or booking a time to talk to one of our team. I'd really like to thank the opportunity to the Sculptform team for letting us speak and present. Although it's all a very fast snapshot on what we do, I think the takeaways for the majority of people here are that what Recumba do and what Light Project do complement one another. There's a decorative aspect and a luminaire design aspect to every fixture, but there's also that medium of light where the intent of what you're trying to draw someone's attention to is pivotal in creating an end result that everyone's happy with. So look, anyone's got any questions, feel free to contact me after this or reach out to Sculptform, but I'll hand back over to Kai. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tom. It was great to see the presentation and just the extent of creativity that can exist in lighting just as an output of a fitting. I think the level of engagement which you guys have with various stakeholders is really important to the success of the project. We've already got lots of questions coming through, I think, for you, but we'll try and save a few of those for the Q&A section at the end. But for now, I'd like to introduce Rosina to the digital stage. Rosina is an interior designer with extensive global experience across Europe, Russia, Asia, and Australia, working with the Woods Bagot team since 2004. She has a long list of accolades and has got a passion for lighting, so I'm sure she's going to have a very interesting perspective to bring to this conversation. Thank you, Rosina.
I will unmute, and apologies to everyone when I keep disappearing. It's only because I'm coughing on the side. I haven't been hugely well, but I do sit now in South Australia, where I feel for all the Victorians. So sending a lot of love to your side. I'm sitting in my shack, so there's a good 70s vibe behind me, and I have really bad lighting on my face. So we're breaking a few rules here, but it's nice to be vulnerable as well. Thank you for listening. This is a really great discussion, and I'm really enthused by the attitude from the first two speakers, because it sits squarely with us as designers and our role within that kind of realm. And I'm going to take you through a short presentation which kind of just highlights the process that we go through, the things that we should be considering. Sometimes when we get it wrong, and I'm going to show you when I think we don't quite reach for the stars, and then when we get it really right, and what's the magic formula in doing that. So bear with me as I take you through this journey. But I was really happy to hear, and it's a good segue, because telling the story is the most critical part of any project. As a team, collaboratively, it's our role to tell the story on behalf of a client, and how we tell that story is about how we create an environment. So how does the environment speak to you, and what must it do? So the case study I'm going to show you now is for BHP in Adelaide. We look after BHP globally and do their work, and so the nuance of how we can create a new home for them that was really bold, that also represented them being professional. But the most important thing was bringing mine site workers straight into an office building, how you actually level that response so that people feel welcome and connected. So how can lighting and environments actually change behaviours in how people respond to space? And ultimately, I think that's what we do as designers. We are translators, and together as a team, we have to do that. So this is the first slide I'm showing you, which just represents how we've tried to help people feel welcome and connected. This is their kind of welcome floor. So the space is deep in texture. It has a multitude of sort of richness in it. It's got dark and light. And we also must consider where, in fact, we are. So this is in Adelaide. It's Mediterranean climate, very clear light. So daylighting is a big factor. And so when you're trying to pair that with warm and rich, it's something to consider as a team. The hero really is the stair here. And for BHP, they produce copper. This stair is clad in their copper. And the question for us as a team with our approach to lighting design is, should we light the surface? Should we light the inside of it? Should we light the ambience around it so that it just sits on its own within that space? Or should we create sort of those accents to draw attention to? And as designers, together with the lighting designers and also product, we should really talk about that. We should also start the process by together identifying the narrative. So telling the story and making sure that it's not a technical response only, but it's actually all of us are in the toolkit to create sort of a holistic space that actually responds to that. So for this stair, we actually knew that we were dealing with the daylight as a general ambience. So we created the richness within the stair, and it also supported the feeling of feeling safe and connected, which is a BHP. So that where you put your hand and how you navigate through this ribbon of gold is actually where focus is. So I just wanted to talk about that in a small step. The other one I'm going to show you is how spaces, we shouldn't design and set. You know, spaces change, environments change, the weather changes the way that you experience that space. And so this project is, if you've probably heard of the GAN or the Journey Beyond, the Overlander, there's a few trains there. But we were engaged to design the new Platinum class of travel. And, you know, the landscape in itself formed a key part of the design. But with that comes constant change. And so how do you actually design for that? The other thing to consider was when you're on a train and it's only 2.8 meters wide and you're essentially inside a silver bullet, how do you help people feel a sense of space and comfort, the feeling of that coming in? How do you use lighting as wayfinding? And how do you actually adjust light to deal with a day setting, a pre-dinner drink setting, and then an evening setting? So we worked very carefully on that. And we also do our own modelling at Woods Bagot. We can't afford to get any beautiful models, so we just use our staff, and unfortunately you're going to have to deal with me in this one. So the image on the left is setting the scene. It's the bar, the lounge where you walk into, and the idea is that the focus is not on the lighting, not on the materials. In fact, it's about elevating that feeling of lightness and focusing you into the window, which unfortunately we couldn't take photos of the train moving. So you're seeing another train in the background, but in reality, it moves through the beautiful Australian landscape, bringing in that richness. So lighting can't be a distraction sometimes. Sometimes it has to take a step back and not be the focus. And so in this environment, we tried to do that by, you know, hiding it behind necessaries, and trains have lots of moving parts. So hiding it behind the pelmet, and then accentuating the detail on the ceiling, the beautiful brass, which is having a twofold effect of lighting and also air conditioning. Now, the circular light on the back wall, which is kind of glaring in this photo, but actually in reality, it's a beautiful natural limestone from Australia, and it's telling a story to the passenger who is welcomed onto the train with, you know, RM Williams gear, October hats, and then every material is reflecting the Australian kind of landscape or our Australiana culture. So that's a feature piece which the guests and the seem to like taking photos in front of, and we're quite proud of that. Again, this is now how we had to deal with a very small space, but how lighting can actually tie the two together, and how it can then at night, they tablecloth the whole thing, the lights go down, the candles come out, and how can we actually make it an easy adjustment for the trained staff without needing really high, you know, specialist training. So how can you actually also make spaces that can flex and move without us all being there walking beside them? So there's a couple of case studies there, but I did want to show the vulnerability of when sometimes we just didn't get it quite right. And the project I'm going to show you is a beautiful project. It's an award-winning project. It's one of Frame Magazine's best bars in the world. However, as the critical eye of designers and engineers and product makers, I think we will be able to see where we probably didn't quite get certain elements right. Here it is, beautiful bar, very gorgeous feature light. So that's all openable, and it does glow. It's on a square and it glows, and it's beautiful as you approach it. And when you actually go in, there's this amazing light feature, which I think we did a great job on. Excuse me. So a custom piece, very gorgeous. However, the back bar is looking great, even, it's great, and the leather front of that bar is also working really well. But I think you can see we've charred some beautiful timber panels, we've had custom handles made. However, you can see a bit of a strobing patchiness on that back wall, and I think that's when, you know, there was a bit, it didn't quite come out the way that we planned. But I think it's important to know that and talk about that and the why. But the rest of it's working really beautifully. Excuse me. And you can see in this image here that sometimes it's the spaces you don't light that actually are really successful. So we wanted that feeling of coming from, you know, a big sort of the bar area down, dark, just pin lighting to guide your wayfinding, but actually let the darkness hold, and then just light that feature of that brass handle on the right. And in fact, the lighting in that little lounge area starts to really work very well, but you'll see at the top, I think it's a bit stripy. So I think it's really important as teams to talk about when we get it wrong, because we only learn from that. But when we get it right, it's magic. And this is one of our proud projects. I was not the designer on it, so I'm speaking on behalf of Woods Bagot. However, it followed the process that we go through, which I think I've sort of articulated, which is start with a narrative, brief the team on the narrative. What's the story we're trying to tell? Lighting is just one of those tools in the toolkit. And then also create a pathway for success. So success only comes when, one, we treat each other as a team of experts that have an equal voice, that we respect each other with what we have to bring to the table. And in fact, it's a platform to learn from each other. So all of us have different skills. All of us have to consider different elements. And the success in the result is actually the journey to get there. So you've seen this before, but I just wanted to talk about how subtlety is really just as beautiful as kind of feature walls. And here's another image of it. So thank you. And I'm so sorry, I'm not talking very well, But I just wanted to add that it's only through a team effort and an awareness and learning that we come out with great results, and look forward to the chat. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rosina. Really loved the project on the train and using lighting to bring the natural environment outside into that space. I thought that was very cool. We're now going to move into Q&A, and I think I might start that off with just a question specifically to Rosina. Rosina, I know off stage...
I'm here. Sorry, I just didn't want to cough on the screen.
All good. I know off stage that you had mentioned that you had quite a bit of experience in lighting before moving into your role as an interior designer with Woods Bagot. Can you maybe quickly touch on how your history and your experience in lighting has made you the designer that you are today?
Yeah, thank you. It starts with my family. So my family are Artemidi, Australia. So I grew up, having an appreciation of product, but the steps to get to product. And then obviously just, living and breathing, discussing lighting all the time. It was just the family table requirement. And then sort of being forced into doing an illumination engineering course at night to equal my interior design. But my parents kind of drummed it into me from a young age that to be a really good designer, you're going to have an appreciation of the steps, the technical steps to get to lighting a space, specifying lighting. So it was kind of a family thing, but it actually was something I was always interested in anyway, because I think if we're creating spaces which influence the way people behave, their moods, their feeling, then lighting's a really important tool in that. So I was really happy I ended up doing it, but I'm a bit conflicted because I know products so well from being in my family, and then having the engineering training and the luminance and the lux and the perceived everything is drummed into me. And then I'm a creative and I'm a designer, but I think it works well for me to then set that platform for projects.
That's a great response. I've done that lighting engineering course also, and I can testify that it is not exactly the most creative course. It's very valuable, but nonetheless. Moving along, I might direct this one to Tom just to start off with. Tom, you've kind of already touched on this. Can you just talk, maybe give your perspective on the importance of collaboration and collaboration at the earliest stage possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, the way that I look at it, and because I've come from sort of the opposite of Rosina, I've come from an architectural background and fallen into lighting. When I first fell into lighting, I kind of didn't appreciate the level of technical knowledge that was required to basically support projects of significant complexity, right? And I think I draw a parallel with it in landscape architecture. There are two things I never was taught about at university while I studied architecture. So the collaboration is key, I think, for any architect, interior designer to engage with someone that has the technical knowledge, expertise or foresight to deliver whatever their objectives are, right? So whether or not, there's a few little questions in here, whether or not it's about layering, drawing your eye through, the changing the human response, or enhancing user experience by telling stories. These are all questions that need to be hashed out at the start. Like Sculptform wouldn't have been as successful if the details weren't known about how the structure went together. It wouldn't have been as successful if we didn't have those communications early in order to resolve any issues we may have had later on down the track. And most of the projects that we work on and that I showed earlier today reference the level of detail required with a simple product to get a detail right or to get an overall outcome that's successful. So I think that collaboration has to start early and it has to finish incredibly late. Like lighting's one of the things that's fitted off last, as Dan alluded to before. And it's one of the things that's often substituted because people don't appreciate the value it brings. So it's up to the architects, the client, and us, I suppose, to demonstrate the value lighting brings through educating them on product application and design intent. And that's where that balance needs to be between a lot of stakeholders to all be united to share and send that message to the end client is kind of how I perceive that.
Great. I'd like maybe Dan, if you want to chime in on that sort of same question on sort of collaboration, because I'd like to have your perspective on the same topic.
Yeah. Well, I think first let me preface by saying Recum has been around for 3 years now. It's been a long time, but for the last 10 years, one thing that's really defined the company has been collaboration, the nature of collaboration, more bespoke projects, more collaboration with product designers. And across the board, whether it's a product or a bespoke project that we're working on, the thing that we consistently find with collaboration is it works best when you first start working with a collaborator. It's often a bit of a dance. Do you reveal the full budget to the supplier or the manufacturer? Like, how much control do you give away creatively? There's this sort of tension, and we find that the best projects happen when that tension evaporates, whether it's when you're working on a second project or you just click with that other team. It's kind of like the teams just merge and seamlessly, and it stops being sort of instruction. This person, the architect specifies to the design team specifies to the manufacturer. It's when they sort of start to cross those boundaries and everyone just functions as a singular team. It's amazing. All of the wasted time and effort and budget just kind of disappears, and everyone just plays at the top of their game, really. That's why you want to work with professionals. That's why you want to work with people that take pride in their work. You just waste so much less time, and you deliver much better results when it's like that. And as Tom said, that happens by approaching each other extremely early in the process. And it's fascinating to think, yes, ending it very, very late, like seeing the end result together and sort of talking about what worked, talking about what didn't work. I think debriefing is really key.
I might continue on that question, Dan, and often a key stakeholder or collaborator on a project is going to be an engineer of some description. So like in lighting, that's going to be an electrical engineer. And engineers can often be seen as the enemy of creativity. From the perspective of a decorative lighting supplier, what are some of the key challenges and how do you navigate them with addressing engineering requirements?
It's definitely a challenge. Perhaps part of my role is actually to bridge that gap. So I come from a mechanical engineering background as well as industrial design, and I did the lighting engineering course that yourself and Rosina did as well here at RMIT. So yeah, all of the lux calculations, good fun. So I think it's about empathizing with the other stakeholders, really. It's understanding that the engineers are there to serve a purpose, not just to block the creativity. And sometimes it's about saying, you know what, like this doesn't need a decorative luminaire here. I find that's a more rare occasion. I find that they tend to cut the decorative element aggressively towards the end of many projects, and it can often very much compromise a project when you don't have a centerpiece. But I think it's talking the same language. You want to be empathetic. You want to understand why they have the budget allocated to the functional lighting when they do. Part of the way you can work around it is make a decorative fitting that is also a performance fitting. They don't have to be mutually exclusive, so that you get two birds, one stone, really.
Rosina, I might get you to chime in on that same line of conversation.
Yeah, and I think as I think I've mentioned, I really think it needs to start from the beginning and a discussion as a team about what the outcome is going to look like, and then how we are all players with bringing an expertise and a point of view, and to celebrate those differences, that we actually, it's not about the designer leading because we think that our role is the most critical. Leading as a design team for a creative vision, but bringing in, our job is equally to bring in and help people feel that their value is of equal importance to solve not the problem, but create the opportunity. So I think it's always nice to have those project initiations where you don't talk about the solution. You don't try to work out the solution yet, but you start with the narrative, the why, how we want people to feel when they walk in these spaces. Do we want them to feel relaxed and calm, or are we trying to motivate them? And you know, everyone, we're all humans here, so there will always be an understanding of a human response. So it's just, how do we each create that human response in the space, and respecting that we are going to have to push and pull to come out with a really great end result as well. Because, you know, it depends where your mind is wired, but if we're creatives and then there's technically wired people, there's naturally going to be different points of view that struggle. So if the sweet spot is when you create good team dynamics and a really great culture within the project that people feel empowered to contribute and question, is actually when you get the best results.
Very good. I'm now going to open up the question. I'm not too sure who wants to answer this one first, but how do you approach a space with substantial natural light? Anyone want to have a go?
You embrace it first. You just accept that there's natural light.
Yeah, look, I think that's probably right? Like, we live in Australia where the majority of opportunities for architecture is to embrace that natural light. Like, we're getting to a point where, you know, you can have just as much fun sitting in a dark space or a campfire or something like that, to enjoy an emotive response to lighting, that any of those natural forms of light should be embraced. And if you're talking about how do you control it and limit it from glare or any of these other applications, this is something that architects have spent years understanding, from Parthenon to all these things. How do we embrace the true value of what light brings? And humans are reliant on it, right? They're reliant on the biophilic nature of, I suppose, lighting to basically allow their, you know, circadian rhythm, which is a buzzword at the moment, to allow them to sleep, nap, and be productive throughout the day. It's that cycle of natural daylighting that everyone's trying to replicate, right? So if you've got too much natural light, embrace it or pull down your blinds.
Yeah, I suppose some of the, I mean, if you're thinking like you're never going to overpower the sun, it's the natural nemesis of artificial lighting, and as Rosina and Tom said, you don't want to compete, you just want to complement. So I think some very like technical functional elements that you might consider would be the color temperature of the light, whether you use a cooler color temperature than you might otherwise use, because it's going to appear warmer in contrast. Nowadays we have tunable color LEDs that are very widely available, and also pretty sophisticated control systems that allow you to dim or shift color depending on the environment. So if you're looking for like a really technical solution to that kind of thing, that would be one consideration. The other would be, allowing it to be very visible, not blocking the natural light where you can get away with it.
And just to add to both of you, I agree with you, is that's an environmental, so environment. So if it's naturally lit, embrace that, as we're all saying. But then how do you draw focus to maybe a few design elements that just bring the scale down to that human scale? And that's where artificial and natural lighting really sings, when you can not sort of fight one or the other, but accept that they have to live harmoniously together. And that's when you get really great engineers actually on board, because it is color temperature and its response to environment.
I think this is a conversation which could go on for a very long time, but unfortunately we do need to wrap it up now. If anyone in the crowd's still got any questions, we will have details for getting in contact with us at the end. Also jump on the Q&A, and any questions which get unanswered, we will get those out to the relevant people to answer for you. But now I'll just hand it back to Kate to do a quick wrap up, and she will also draw out the prize for today's webinar.
Thanks, Kai, and thank you to all our wonderful presenters. your passion really comes through in your presentations. I know we have a lot of questions that we still can get to, so if you missed out on parts of the webinar, you will get a recording sent through to you, and we'll send out an email. We'll have the contacts for all of our speakers, so you can actually follow up if you want some more detailed information. But now for the fun part that I know everyone enjoys, we will send out a lovely gift hamper to a lucky winner with a bottle of Moto Chandon and some lovely snacks. So just paying attention, you do have to let us know if you're still here so we can get your details. Now, have we got Ben Evans? So we're drawing these out from the question tab. So Ben, if you are still online, please let us know.
Can you give it to someone else?
You do have to be here. So
yeah, see you later, Ben Evans. Sorry.
Ben, you've got there's a lot of other people that are here. Now you have to have been asking questions as well, just to let you know. Ben, the countdown's on, so we might need to go to the next name, unfortunately. All right, Chi Lu. Chi, let us know if you're still online, and we'll grab your details to send out that package later. Oh, there you go. We've got a lucky winner. So Chi, I'll send you through an email and grab your details. So that wraps up our webinar. Thank you very much. I know you all have to get back to your busy days, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the studio at our next events. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.